Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. Today we're doing a Spotlight cache planning overview, so we're focusing on the month of September, help you get those caches planned out. But before we fully dive into it for September week by week, I did want to have just this general graphic shown of October as well, so that way you can plan out for either upcoming cards or maybe cards you haven't picked up in the past that are making their return. So here we have this nice graph from EK August Snap. Definitely recommend giving them a follow, but gives us a nice overview of the spotlights for the next 2 months, including the Spider season and the Symbiote one. If you want some more specific details on these cards, I'll leave a link in the description below, especially for the Symbiote cards. I'm not going to run through what every single card here does, because I've covered these in past videos, so if you want to learn more about them, I'll have some links in the description below where I went over kind of when we initially found out about these cards. But planning out your spotlights, choosing which weeks to open, that's kind of one of the most important things for people in Snap, so I wanted to give some insights into what I would recommend for the September season. With that out of the way, let's dive right into the Symbiote Spidey season. We're kicking off the season with the Silver Sable week, which I think is one of, if not the best weeks of the whole season, in terms of new card quality as well as cards that are returning. So Silver Sable is a 1/1 that on reveal steals 2 power from the top card of your opponent's deck and gains that power. So kind of like Cassandra Nova, this card seems really cracked to me. It just seems really, really strong. The fact that it is pretty much always going to be a 1/3 that is sometimes a 1/5 or potentially even larger in a dedicated bounce deck. That is just really above rate. I've seen some people say, well, you know, maybe they're just not going to play that -2 power card. And to that I say, that's super fine, because even if they aren't playing that card, it's still a 1/3. 1/3s are good, and it's also limiting their options because it's disincentivizing them from playing the card that got hit by her effect. Not to mention, if you get it multiple times, it just gets even bigger and then disables even more cards. Anyone who has been hit by the double Cassandra Nova and then draws after the fact knows how bad a -2 reduction in power feels. So Silver Sable, I think, is legitimately kind of like New Age Nebula, where I think this is going to be a 1-drop that is just splashed in a million different decks under the sun, because you don't need to build around it. It's just good stats for cost with a powerful effect that can get even more powerful if you end up cloning it or bouncing it or anything like that. So for that reason, I think this is actually one of, if not the best card of the season, believe it or not. And then following it, we have Mockingbird and US Agent, 2 other very powerful cards. I think a lot of people have Mockingbird by now, but if you don't, this card is a huge, huge enabler of a bunch of different archetypes, from Thanos to Mysterio decks to Zoo. It's just played in a million different places because it's really good and it can fit into a bunch of different decks. So that one is an absolute slam dunk to pick up. And then US Agent. A lot of people missed this card because it was really underwhelming on release. It got buffed after it left Spotlight caches, which always leaves kind of a sour taste in people's mouths. And so now this is, I believe, our first chance at getting US Agent again. So the fact that it's being paired with 2 other very strong looking cards, and it's not crazy played right now or anything, but it is strong and it does find a home in decks. So I think if you are missing 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 of the cards here, this is just an absolute slam dunk week that might just be the best week of the season. Moving on to week 2, from the 10th to the 17th of September, we have Madam Web. Madam Web is a 2/1 with ongoing. Once per turn, you can move a card away from this location. People are freaking out about this card. And like, on one hand, I kind of get it. But on the other hand, I think people are getting a little judgment clouded from remembering in the data mines when this was a 2/3. At 2/3, I think this is one of the best 2-drops in the game, if not the best 2-drop in the game. Kind of like upgraded Jeff in a lot of ways. But it's not a 2/3 anymore. It's a 2/1, and 2/1s are bad. The stats, at least, are bad. You do not really want to be playing 2/1s. Now, the effect potentially is very strong. I mean, this does seem like an absolute mainstay in traditional move decks, or like the move bounce style of deck. And the ability is so strong for those decks that it probably makes up for the downside of it being a very, very understated 2-drop. That being said, I'm not convinced this card is going to necessarily live up to the hype. I think it will be good for traditional move decks, but traditional move decks have struggled for a while, and I'm not overly convinced that this one card is going to be the magical thing that kind of puts them back into relevancy. On top of that, I think traditional move decks are, despite the memes of like Heimdall and to lose, they can actually be kind of hard to play. And I do think there's a lot of room for mistakes there, and they're just difficult. So I'm open to being wrong on this one. But I do think that even though the card will be powerful in move-based decks, I just don't know if it's going to live up to the crazy game-breaking hype I'm seeing some players talk about. So for me, I don't think this is a card I would be prioritizing this month unless, you know, traditional move or move bounce is your absolute favorite thing. I think it's hard for this card to find a home in anywhere but those shells. In terms of the other cards this week, Silk, fine card, been in spotlights a few times, really just played in the tempo move style stuff, and there are a bunch of versions without her, so I don't think Silk is a priority pickup. Alioth, on the other hand, really strong right now. It's possible maybe that changed in the wake of the balance updates we got a few days ago. I don't think that will be the case, though. I think Alioth is still incredibly powerful, and if you don't have it, it is a 6-drop that is worth picking up. So in general, for this week, if you're a big move fan, Madam Web's good to get. If you're a big tempo move fan, Silk is okay. And if you just like slamming big 6-drops that say no to your opponent's cards, well, you can't get a better card than Alioth. But I think for more people than not, this is probably going to be a skip week, just because I think that the traditional move archetype is not the most popular thing out there. Next up is the Arana week, and this is another one I am a bit more excited about. So Arana is a 1/1 with Activate. Give the next card you play +2 power and move it to the right. This is the first Activate card we're seeing outside of the Season Pass Symbiote Spider-Man. Now, fair warning, I'm recording this in advance. I'm going to be away on vacation during the first week of this season's release, so I do not know all the details on Activate. All I know is what we know at the time being, which is essentially Activate's a thing where you hold down on the card to activate the Activate ability. There are still a bunch of things we do not know about it. Can you activate the same turn you play a card? I'd say probably no, but we don't know that for sure. And the big one is, how does Activate sequencing work? Is it something where you can set up your sequencing? Where, let's say I'm playing a bunch of cards, if I activate before I play my cards, does it go off in that order? Or is it like the new change to the move mechanic where activate always happens first? I think that is a big thing in determining how good or bad activate is. And by the time this comes out, I imagine we'll have some clarification on activate. So I'll leave a comment below with some updated thoughts once we know more. But for right now, I'm going under the assumption that you cannot activate the turn you play the card, and that you can choose to sequence activate in order with your other played cards that turn, because I think that just makes for a stronger and more interesting mechanic. Arana seems cool. I like this a bunch. This is one where obviously another card here that traditional move and the bounce move Human Torch stuff likes a lot. Anytime you're giving power and moving the card, really good for Human Torch. But this isn't solely confined to that kind of shell. This is something I could see even replacing Hulkbuster in a destroy deck, where you just use this, activate it on your Deadpool, buff it up, blow it up, gives you another 1-drop to blow up with Killmonger or to eat with your Carnage. It just seems like you could find a very reasonable home there. Outside of that, I'm not too sure. Maybe with one of the other cards that we are going to see here in the final week. But in general, I think this card does have a relatively niche application, but it will be very strong in those niches because it just has such high synergy. So another one where if you are a big traditional move enjoyer, or maybe you're a big destroy enjoyer, Arana seems like a card worth picking up. Outside of there, I'm not too sure that a lot of decks will end up finding a home for her. There are a lot of rumors, and it's almost been soft confirmed that Zabu is likely to get Activate as an ability, which maybe can bring this card back in popularity a little bit, because when old Zabu was around, this was one of the better 4-drops in the game. So if a new, better iteration of Zabu comes back around with Activate, I could see Ms. Marvel potentially rising to see more play. Maybe by the time this is out, that change will already have happened, which would be really nice. But I do think this card is a little underrated relative to its general power. It did define multiple different metagames, and so if we do see that Zabu change, I would not be surprised to see it coming back to the metagame a bit. Good card overall. I think one of the ones that is a solid pickup if you don't have it. And then Sage. Sage is another one where I think a lot of players didn't pick this one up on release and have regretted it because it ended up seeing play in a plethora of different decks. Most notably, it's been making waves in Mr. Negative, but a lot of bounce decks, a lot of these other mid-range decks. Sage just goes in a bunch of decks. She's a good card, and I think it's one that a lot of players are missing and will want to pick up. So I think in general, if you're missing 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 of the cards this week, it's a rather good week. Compared to the other two, I'd probably place it higher than the previous week, but not quite as high as the Silver Sable one. And then our final week to close out the season from September 24th to the 1st of October involves Scarlet Spider. Scarlet Spider is a 4/5 with Activate. Add an exact clone of this to another location. This is another card where, depending on how Activate works, this could make this card way better, way worse. But I think he is up there with Silver Sable as potentially the best card of the season in caches. It just seems rather strong anytime you are buffing this card up, whether it be with a Shuri, a Forge, Arana, really any card that gives additional power, you're just doubling it. And you're spreading it out across the board, which is nice, so you're not like all in on one location. I think this has quite a bit of potential because of that. Though I imagine where the clone goes is random, so you do have a little bit of a downside there in not being able to control where it lands. I think the amount of power you are getting is worth it, because essentially you're getting, at worst, a 4/10 that is split between 2 locations. And I think that on its own, some decks would play, but that with synergy where you can buff it up and get even more stats makes it a very appealing card. The other cards this week are Scar and White Widow. Scar's a little bit more fringe, but I do think he is a fun build around if you like playing with a lot of 10 power cards. He's an interesting payoff. And it seems like a little bit further down the line, we're going to be getting some more additional support for him in November. So he might not be a bad one to get a hold of, even if he's not the most meta-relevant card in the world right now. And then White Widow. White Widow is just like a tier card. This card is going in so many different decks. It is just one of the best 2-drops in the entire game right now, and I don't expect that to change by this point. So yeah, I think this is another week where it's mostly a slam dunk if you're missing 2 out of the 3 cards, especially if one of them is White Widow. I'd probably rate this either second or tied for second in terms of the overall spotlights for the month, but I still think the first week with Silver Sable probably ends up being the best one in terms of just overall card quality. And then as a bonus, I figured I'd talk a little bit about Symbiote Spider-Man as well as these potentially extra cards we might be getting during the month. Symbiote Spider-Man 4/6 with Activate. Merge your lowest cost card here with this. Copy its text like it just revealed. This seems really cool. I'm not fully sure where exactly this is going to go, but I could see it being used as kind of like a double up for Shuri in like Nimrod focused decks. There's obviously the meme of waving out a Galactus. Galactus doesn't go off. You play Symbiote Spidey, re-trigger Galactus for even more power, which is kind of funny. But I think this is one that's going to take much experimentation post-release to really get a feel for how good it is. But I think it is probably good, and at the very least interesting to try and build around. Obviously, on-reveal decks are probably going to make use of this fairly well. Copying on-reveal stuff is really good. We've seen that with like Wong and Absorbing Man. Anytime you're copying like a high-costed on-reveal, it's usually not too bad. So those are the places I could see Symbiote Spidey finding a home. And as usual, in terms of if the Season Pass is worth picking up or not, if you're going to spend any money in Marvel Snap, the Season Pass is probably like the only thing you should spend money on realistically. If you're only going to pick one thing, Doesn't mean you have to get it every month if this card doesn't really look appealing to you. There's no harm in skipping it. But I do think, if you want to get the best bang for your buck, picking up the season passes is the way to go. In terms of the other two cards, Tombstone and Uncle Ben, these look fun. I don't know if we're getting these or not for sure. There's been some stuff in the data mines about potentially alternate ways to acquire cards and whatnot, snap packs. We still don't know anything about that. Maybe we will by the time this comes out. Maybe they'll talk about it. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Could be them bringing back the diner. Could be this new snap packs thing. Could be something else. They could not release entirely this season. We just don't know. But Tombstone is a 4/6 that goes down to 1 cost if an enemy card was destroyed last turn. And Uncle Ben, when he's destroyed, ends up summoning Spider-Man. Both kind of fun, flavorful cards that I don't think they would necessarily put in the spotlights, especially since they aren't in the spotlight data mine. So it would be cool to see these added to the game and given out to players through some sort of alternate acquisition system. And that's going to wrap it up for this month's Spotlight review. So in quick summary, I think Silver Sable Week has one of, if not the best card of the month, as well as the highest quality of other cards in it. Then followed by, I think, a tie between the Scarlet Spider and Arana weeks, and then the Madam Web week coming in last. But again, it comes down to the decks you really enjoy playing and the types of strategies that are appealing to you. So if you are a, classic move gamer, so naturally the Madam Web week will probably have a lot more value to you compared to like Silver Sable or the Scarlet Spider week. So really depends on what you enjoy. Only you can decide that for yourself. But hopefully this guide helped provide a little bit of perspective on the weeks that I think are most valuable, as well as who they're most valuable for. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Let me know in the comments what you are most interested for this month and even next month. Honestly, next month, I think, is the most excited I've been about a Snap season in a long time. Symbiotes are my jam, and I think we have a lot of fun and interesting cards coming that month. So I'm looking forward to it. But we're going to close it out here. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.